Hello my dear friends, you're in the Melitopol summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine, and we will begin with the Crimean Front line. During the previous night, pro-Ukrainian sources published a very interesting video, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking the northern Crimea with drones. And as you can see, according to this video, just according to the first parts of this video, the Ukrainians were attacking not just bridges and not just the logistics of the northern Crimea. The Ukrainians were attacking parking sites, and the Ukrainians were attacking trucks with cargo. And this is a very important situation. During the second part of the video, we can see how the Russians were trying to build pontoon bridges in this area and how the Ukrainians were attacking them. In this part of the video, we can see another parking site that was attacked by the Ukrainians. And as a result of attack, several trucks and several vehicles were completely destroyed. So this is exactly what the Ukrainians are doing right now. I would like to remind you that between the 7th and the 12th of June of 2026, the Ukrainians were mainly attacking bridges. The Ukrainians attacked the Chongar bridge, the Ukrainians attacked the Genichesk bridge, the Ukrainians attacked bridges around the settlements of Armyansk, Mirnaya, Stavki, and so on. And those attacks forced the Russians to both restrict the access to the logistics of the northern Crimea and, the most important, to slow down these logistics. And as a result of these actions, different drivers, vehicles and trucks were forced to stop nearby these strategical crossings in waiting of their turn to cross this area. One of these places is this one. The Russians, more precisely drivers and business of Crimea, began using these territories to store their trucks while waiting their turn to cross the Chongar bridge. And this situation led to the situation that we can see right now in front of your screens. Dozens of trucks are located nearby these crossings, these bridges, and the Ukrainians during the previous night, between the 12th and the 13th of June of 2026, carried out a massive attack, destroying all these trucks. Another important satellite picture was published this morning, and here we can see the consequences of attack on the Chongar bridge. As we can see, there are several holes on these bridges. Both the southern and the northern bridges were damaged. The Russians right now, as we can see, are trying to build more pontoon bridges, but it will take time. The Russians, furthermore, during the previous nights, the Ukrainians published this picture where we can see the approximate roads of drones that the Ukrainians were using to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. The sources reported that the Ukrainians used around 280 drones, and as we can see, the biggest number of drones was recorded through the Crimea and the southern Kherson. As a result of this massive attack, as we can see, the Ukrainians badly damaged the logistics of the northern Crimea. Furthermore, we have a fire anomaly in the area of the settlement of Taman. As you can, there is a Taman oil refinery or Taman oil base, and as a result of attack, at least 2 fire anomalies were recorded through this territory. It seems that the Ukrainians during the previous night damaged this object of energy infrastructure. As of the morning of the 13th of June of 2026, we have nothing to show you. We don't have videos that can confirm this attack. Furthermore, 2 more fire anomalies were recorded around the settlement of Armyansk, to the north of the settlement and to the south. So these are the fire anomalies I'm talking about. And according to these fire anomalies, it seems that the Ukrainians during the night attacked the Crimean Titan enterprise, which is located to the north of Armyansk, and the Ukrainians attacked the railway infrastructure and this factory, this enterprise in the northern parts of the settlement of Krasnoperekopsk, which is located to the south of Armyansk. So as we can see, this territory is about to be established complete control by the armed forces of Ukraine, and they most likely will continue attacking this territory with hundreds of drones in coming days. The Russians are trying to find a solution how to slow down, how to reduce the number of strikes in this area, and how to establish strong logistics between Crimea and Kherson. So of course, that is why the Russians are searching for Ukraine's launching sites on the territory of the northern Kherson. And it seems that during the previous night, the Russians found something. According to information we have, between the 12th and the 13th of June of 2026, the Russians attacked something in the northern parts of Kherson. In this video, we can see the consequences of attack. The Russians destroyed some facility, probably an oil depot or probably some fuel base. As a result of attack, lots of explosions were recorded during the night, and we see a secondary detonation. Maybe this is a warehouse or some depot that the Ukrainians were using to fulfill their drones to attack deep inside of Crimea, and as a result of the Russian operation they managed to discover this position and to destroy it. So we have a lots of videos, and as we can see there were a lots of secondary detonations, which means that something important was destroyed by Russians. Anyway, during the upcoming night we will understand whether the Russians managed to hit the target or not, because if during the upcoming night between the 13th and the 14th of June of 2026 the Ukrainians repeat their attack through the northern Crimea, then most likely the Russians managed to destroy something, but not something that is related to the crisis in the northern parts of Crimea. Another important video was published by Russians from the area of the settlement of Zelenodolsk. Here we have the Kryvyi Rog power station. This video was published by pro-Russian sources, and here we can see how Russians using drones were attacking this object of energy infrastructure, dealing significant damage. As of now, we don't know for sure whether this object was completely destroyed or badly damaged, but one thing is clear: the Russians were trying to slow down, to damage this territory, and to create a blackout, partial blackout through Kherson region, also with the same purposes, to reduce Ukraine's space capabilities to attack in the direction of the northern part of Crimea and its logistics. Furthermore, the Russians published the video from the city of Melitopol, and here we can see how the Russians were trying to bring down Ukraine's drones that were flying in the direction of Crimea, and we see that the Russians were using air defense forces for these purposes, but it seems that the Ukrainians attacked a position of air defense forces of the Russian Federation, the territory of Melitopol, and then the Russians stopped shooting. As for the previous night, according to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the Russians used 118 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and this is the smallest number probably since the beginning of this week. The Russians right now are collecting and concentrating drones before the next massive attack, and according to information we have, most likely between the 13th and the 14th of June of 2026, so during the upcoming night, the Russians will carry out the massive attack through the entire Ukraine, trying to deal damage to objects of critical and energy infrastructure, and of course dealing damage to logistics of Ukraine as well. Now let's move to the Zaporizhzhia direction. We have lots of very interesting updates. The Russians intensify their attacks on the territory of the settlement of Tavrizhka. This is a part of the Orechov agglomeration. These days we know that the Russians are trying to advance in the direction of the city of Orechov. The Ukrainians use hundreds of drones with the purpose to stop and to slow down the Russians. And according to information we have, the Russians began another the Ukrainians began another counteroffensive operation, and this time the Ukrainians are trying to recapture the villages of Vasilivka, Razdvyanka and Chernovata. According to information we have, the Ukrainians began counteroffensive operation like this, trying to force the Russians to fall back from the villages of Vasilivka, Razdvyanka and Chernovata. Furthermore, according to several pro-Russian sources, the Ukrainians, as a result of a counteroffensive operation, managed to recapture the settlement of Chernovata completely, and that the Russians were forced to fall back from this area. Furthermore, we have this video, and here we can see most likely how exactly the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation started. In this video we can see several vehicles that were entering the settlement of Chernovata, and how Russians were attacking vehicles of the armed forces of Ukraine using drones. So we have lots of episodes, as you can see, lots of videos where we can see how dozens of vehicles were entering the city of Chernovata from the north, and how Russians were destroying all these vehicles with FPV drones. So according just to these two videos, we see that Ukrainians managed to deploy several dozens of troops in the northern part of the settlement, and maybe as a result of this counteroffensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to force the Russians to fall back from this area, and this is the reason why several very reliable pro-Russian sources have colored this territory under complete Ukraine control. control. So as we can see, another video was published to the south of the settlement of Vasilivka. We will not watch this video due to restrictions, and according to this video, the Ukrainians began another counteroffensive operation, but this time to the south of Vasilivka. So as you can see, according to these two roads of attacks, the Ukrainians are trying to cut in pincers positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation between the villages of Vasilivka, Rozdvyanka, Pridorozhnyia, Kosovtseva and Chernovate. So we'll follow this situation because obviously this is a very dangerous situation for the entire Russian Zaporizhzhia offensive operation. The Russians are trying to slow down the Ukrainians, so that is why these days we receive lots of updates from the cities like Zaporizhzhia and Vasilivka. As for the settlement of Zaporizhzhia, yesterday we received the report that the Russians destroyed this warehouse. As a result of attack, this warehouse was completely or badly damaged or even significantly damaged. Today we have a picture where we can see the consequences of attack. The Russians discovered that most likely or supposed that the Ukrainians were using this warehouse to supply their Ukrainian forces along the line of combat contact in the Zaporizhzhia region. Furthermore, during the previous night, the Russians were just attacking the settlement of Vasilivka, more precisely its logistic infrastructure. As you can see, the settlement of Vasilivka is located along railways that go from the settlement of Dnipro further in the southeastern direction towards the Dnipropetrovsk direction, towards the settlements like Prasyana, Vesele, Mizhova, Mala Mykolaievka, right exactly in the direction where the Russians and the Ukrainians are fighting for the triangle of the settlements Pokrovska, Velika Mikhailovka, Gavrilovka. Probably during the previous night, the Ukrainians were trying to deploy additional reinforcements and reserves with the purpose to reinforce their counteroffensive operation or their defenses operation, but the Russians discovered that the Ukrainians brought additional forces in the direction of Vasilivka, and during the night the Russians were bombing and attacking this territory with everything they have. And this is the video of the consequences of attack. As you can see, almost the entire micro district or the entire quarter block was reduced to ruins as a result of the overnight attack that was carried out by Russians. The Russians are trying to make everything possible with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to introduce additional forces in this triangle, where both the Russians and the Ukrainians are attacking each other. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Konstantinivka direction. Probably this is already not the Konstantinivka direction, but the Druzhkivka direction, because the battle for the city of Konstantinivka is about to be finished. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video, and here we can see how Ukrainians were retreating from the settlement of Konstantinivka, trying to find a way how not to be ambushed by the Russians. This is a Ukrainian soldier who was describing the current situation in the area of the city. The situation is very difficult, and he reported that the Ukrainians began withdrawing their positions. At the same time, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians captured additional 172 buildings and that the Ukrainians suffered losses. The Russians right now are fighting for the micro-districts of Krasny Oktyabr, Krasny Gorodok and Pervomaysky districts. So this is the situation in this area. The Russians continue their offensive operation, and obviously within the next 10 days we will receive a report about complete control over the settlement, and we will receive another video with hundreds of flags. At the same time, the Russians intensify their offensive operation through the southwestern parts of the Druzhkivka direction. The Russians right now are trying to attack and take under complete control the villages of Tarskoye, Taretsky, Krasny Kut. So to continue advancing further along the river of Kazyony Tarets and to get as close as possible to the main logistics that goes to the west of the settlement of Druzhkivka. We're talking about these lines. The Russians are trying to establish fire control over the territory. And according to the situation, we expect that in coming days the Ukrainians will try to counterattack Russians in the direction of the settlement Shakhova, Vladimirovka, with the purpose to slow down the Russian southwestern Druzhkivka offensive operation. As for the settlement of Druzhkivka itself, these days the Russians intensify the use of drones. These days we start receiving more and more updates on this matter. Here we have lots of FPV drone attacks through the southern parts of the settlement of Druzhkivka, and here we can see how Russians were attacking vehicles and logistics of the armed forces of Ukraine. So the battle for Druzhkivka begins and intensifies. As for the Lyman Direction, during the previous nights, the Russians attacked the city of Lyman with aviation. Another strike was carried out by Russians. As a result of attack, we can see that something was destroyed, and we have these pictures where we can see the aftermath of attacks. Some positions and temporary deployment points probably were damaged by Russians. Furthermore, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the settlement of Shurova. The settlement of Shurova is the last city, one of the last towns on the Russian side of the river of Seversky Donetsk. That's the Ukrainians use for the logistic purposes, and so that is why we see how the Russians are bombing and attacking this territory with everything they have, with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area, not to use this territory for the logistic purposes. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that according to different sources, the Russians are about to finish the battle for the city of Lyman itself, and probably the Russians will announce complete control over the settlement of Lyman even earlier than a Russian control over the city of Konstantinivka. The Ukrainians are trying to make everything possible with the purpose to slow down the Russians, and today we start receiving reports these days that Ukrainians began counterattacks to the north of the city of Lyman with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back from this area and to probably postpone the Lyman offensive operation. As of now, several pro-Ukrainian sources have already adjusted maps in this area. According to the situation, the Ukrainians are trying to recapture these pockets, these positions to the west of the river of by the name of Zherebets, but the Ukrainians are trying to do the same thing as the Ukrainians did during the Kharkiv counteroffensive operation of 2022. So we'll see whether this time the Russians are able to repel this counteroffensive operation or not. As for the northern directions, during the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special, just several videos where we can see how the Russians were bombing positions of the armored force of Ukraine through the Chernihiv and Sumy regions. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.